no such design philosophy behind it. I would argue it's one of the worst design cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Pot of Prosperity, it's a shit. Welcome back to the channel, guys.
Draw your last pathetic card so I can end this, Yugi.
My grandpa's deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba. But it does contain the unstoppable
Dueling Wave. Before we start, let's plug that Discord yet again. So if you like having actual fun with Yu-Gi-Oh, you can check out our little Discord where we're having it's a nice community. We're growing slowly but surely. We run like alt format tournaments. We have our own like ban list that we run, our own format for the Discord where we like have removed like all the stupid stuff out of the game, such as this or this, and we have this back. So if that sounds interesting to you, go join, and we should be having another tournament very, very soon. We're finishing up the current one, but yeah, go check it out, go join, and it's in the description below. Let's get back into this. Pot of Prosperity is one of the most insane cards ever printed. I hope you understood that. By what I mean by garbage is like garbage for the game, right? Maybe that's a misconception. Maybe that like title's a little like off, but you know what I mean. Garbage in the good way. Yu-Gi-Oh is a game designed around no resource system, right? The resources that you get at the beginning of every game is your 5-card hand, your 40-card deck, up to 60 cards, and your extra deck. That's it. That's all you get. And I guess you could maybe count life points in that equation also. Konami has tried to design around this lack of a resource system by using your hand, deck, extra deck, and life points as your resource system. To varying degrees has worked really well and worked really poorly. For example, costs can be paid by discarding or sending cards from the hand to the graveyard. Or more recently, such as the case of Pot of Prosperity, the card in question, or Pot of Extravagance, its predecessor, banishing from the extra deck. It's a clever way to make like a Faustian type bargain where you trade future grind game, future ability for resources now that you can basically shut your opponent out from the game so that they cannot continue to play. Ideally, right? You tell me when a card says banish 40% of your extra deck to see 6 cards deeper into your deck or to draw 2 more cards for turn 1. What does that give you, right? Especially when you're with Pot of Extravagance, you've seen 7 cards into this duel, or like 11 in the case of Pot of Prosperity versus your opponent just seeing 5, right? What are you trying to tell us? Go first, make crazy board, win the game, right? That's that Faustian bargain. But at the cost of, if your opponent happens to possibly break this board, then you might lose, right? You probably will lose. It's the most stupid Yu-Gi-Oh that you could play. Now, I'll argue that Pot of Extravagance, the predecessor to Pot of Prosperity, is essentially fine, especially in the modern day power level, because of 2 inherent drawbacks. It'll draw 2 random cards from your deck, so you'll see 7 deep, right? You'll see the 5 cards you see in your hand, activate Pot, and then you'll see 2 more additional. It lets you dig just a few more percentage points into the deck, kind of altering some of the consistency percentages when you deck build, right? If you're going to see a 3 of 33% of the time, you might see it more. It might be like 37, 38% of the time if you were to go two more cards deep. You lose 40% of your extra deck for those 2 draws, and on top of that, it's random, meaning that you can't choose what you're banishing. Therefore, you then have to deck build your extra deck in such a way to guarantee you don't lose automatically, or you have to play a deck that is probably worse because it doesn't really rely on its extra deck. Decks that rely on the main deck exclusively are decks that are just in general weaker, right, or more bricky, less consistent messes. If you look at how many decks can possibly use Pot of Extravagance, like Lab, Rescue Ace, Eldritch in the past, like trap decks, right? Where you don't need your extra deck. But those decks have been notoriously somewhat bricky because they have their high-level monsters in the main deck. But it does have to be activated first, lose 40% of your extra deck. It's random. These are solid drawbacks for 2 cards, which is really important in the game. You get a you get a +1. You have 6 for your opponent's 5 going first. I think that's pretty good design overall. If we're gonna make a draw 2 card, this is how we make it. Konami clearly had game balance in mind when designing Pot of Extravagance. Now we get to Pot of Prosperity, the second iteration of this card. It has no such design philosophy behind it. I would argue it's one of the worst design cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Pot of Prosperity has 3 main differences that make it 7 billion to 7.3 billion times better than Pot of Extravagance. Reason 1, you could use it anytime. You don't need to activate it at the beginning of your main phase 1 like Pot of Extravagance. Wow. That's stupid. Why did Konami remove this stipulation? Money, probably, right? Gotta be money. Reason 2, you have to choose, right? You get to choose what you banish from your extra deck, meaning you just take out 3 to 6 superfluous cards that are just useless in your extra deck, or they have a use but they'll only come up in some random grind game that you could get into. But with this, you're pretty much assuring that you won't get to a grind game because you'll see everything you need. This change is insane. Almost every single deck can afford to run this style of card because you choose what to banish, aside from maybe decks like very niche cases like Sky Striker, or maybe branded decks that really rely on their extra deck and it's like very tight. You can't just banish random stuff off it. But every other deck other than that, combo decks, doesn't matter. They can run it. Trap decks, whatever. Pot of Prosperity, boom. That card's nuts. Pot of Extravagance, you can't. Your extra deck is just randomly banished. That's why you can't run it in combo and whatnot. Here, no problem. And the biggest, most important reason for this card being absolutely asinine, no longer do you see 7 cards deep in your deck, which is the 5 plus 2 off the Extravagance. You see now 11 cards deep into your deck. That's over 25% of your deck. It destroys every mathematical percentage for Yu-Gi-Oh deck building that you can come up with. It's absolutely insane. You literally see another hand and then some. Why is this bad? Because card design is based off of said percentages, where, okay, I'll see this card at 30% if it's a 3 of. I'll see this card, I'll see my starter at like 70% or 80%, whatever, right? This card changes all of that and raising it, maybe doubling all of those percentages. And since card quality is so insane now, one card is way better. One good card out of 6 is way better than 2 random ones off the top. Searching is always better than drawing, and this is a pseudo search. It's almost like a search anything from your deck. It's why no one runs the Tantalizing Tune or Trade In or one of those, even Allure. People don't run those cards because drawing is not that good. Drawing is only good if you're trying to get into like a board breaker. Overall, drawing now is not great in Yu-Gi-Oh! It hasn't been since like Exodia FTK. Consistency has reached a point where you don't rely on draws anymore. You rely exclusively on searches, which is also another thing about these drawbacks where the cards say you cannot draw for the rest of the turn. That's only put for like FTK decks because overall, like, no one cares about the draw. Like, very few decks need to draw in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! To get their stuff. This reason, compounded with the first reason, makes this card absolutely stupid. You don't have to activate it first, so what players do is, if they draw their full combo, right, so they draw their starter, extender, and everything, they can play through all their opponent's stuff, they'll do all that, make their crazy board, then at the end, when they've deck thinned their deck to like 20 cards left, they'll drop the Pot of Prosperity, banish the last 6 cards in their extra deck that are useless, and then look at the next 6 cards of their deck to get that one Floodgate, hand trap, whatever is the most devastating way to stop your opponent, just that additional layer of disruption that you cannot play through, right? For example, if I'm running a deck and I make my full combo, right, and I make some negates, interrupts, and whatnot, I take the Pot of Prosperity, activate it, banish the rest of my extra deck, rip off the top, let's say an Ash Blossom or a Nibiru or whatever, impermanence. That's just one other layer. Like, imperm will stop it, like many decks, right? Like, how are you supposed to play second through a full board and imperm, or a full board and Ash, right? That's just too much to overcome. And that's what this card affords people to do. And it even lets you dig for floodgates for anything. If you run 12 non-engine, like hand traps, let's say, you have a 97% chance of seeing one within those 6 cards out of 20. This is telling players inherently, with card design, trade your future, trade your grind game, trade everything, trade the remainder of your extra for a chance to shut out your opponent functionally, fully, FTK. Now, with this great ability of seeing a second hand and being able to activate it whenever, this surely means that this card is cracked going second. No, it's inherently way worse going second. One of its only limitations is that it stipulates that you have to do half damage for the rest of the turn. Like, you cannot, basically just makes it very hard to OTK. Why? Why was one of the only stipulations on this card made for going second? Going second players need every chance that they can get, yet Yu-Gi-Oh! Makes this card overtuned for going first. Make it make sense. All this does is, going second, leave you wide open for a nasty crackback that'll crack your butt open. But what do you guys think? Do you think Pot of Prosperity is garbage? Like, in a good way, obviously? Do you think it's obscenely designed, terribly designed, and just a money grab? I mean, it was released forever ago, but I'm just saying, overall, as we've seen the card, some people have kind of cut it from their decks, but because of crazy hyper consistency. But one thing that I forgot to mention that Pot of Prosperity also does is, if you do hit a deck's consistency on the ban list, they can supplement that consistency hit by just playing more Pot of Prosperity, right? Like, if you hit Snake Eyes to a point, they can just supplement it by playing Pot of Prosperity, right? Oh, we got 1 Ash, right? We'll just drop in 3 Prosperity, right? Like, you just offset whatever, and eventually you'll see some of the stuff you need. Pot of Prosperity and a Poplar would be crazy, correct? So, like, this is what I'm kind of saying. Like, This card is overtuned and just poorly designed in pretty much every single way. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Should it be hit in some way in the future? And if you like this video, please subscribe, like the video, and check this video out because I'm sure you'll love it and you want to continue your journey on the YouTube rabbit hole. Otherwise, I'll see ya as always.